Birds the world over are doing it tough. For many of Australia's grassy woodland birds, the impacts of centuries of land clearing, introduced feral animals and weeds, as well as the ongoing threat of climate change loom large. For one species in particular, its cryptic nature and adaptation to specialised habitats has made the job to halt its decline a huge challenge. Across 3 states, dedicated groups are racing to save it from extinction. This is the story of the Eastern Bristlebird.
Hi, I'm Liz Gould. I'm a Principal Scientist with Healthy Land and Water. So we're standing here at the western edges of Lamington National Park, right on the border with New South Wales, and this behind me is prime Eastern Bristlebird country. So when we talk about bristlebirds, we're talking about a small ground-dwelling bird. So it scurries along in the undergrowth, looking for its food, mostly insects and a bit of seed sometimes. It's about the same size as a noisy myna, which is another Australian native, but bristlebirds are brown and they've got bristles in front of their eyes which protect them when they're running through the undergrowth. So bristlebird also have quite stubby wings, so they don't fly very far, which means that they're really vulnerable on the ground in terms of predators and in terms of fire impacts. They can't get away from things very quickly. So again, that has really big impacts on their survival in terms of local populations and individual pairs. So they breed generally between about September and April, depends on how good a season it is, and depends on the survival rate of the young, their eggs. The males start calling around about the start of our summer storms. Onslaught of summer, the wet weather, the insect abundance is a prime time for breeding. Really critical thing about bristlebird is that males are very territorial. There's been observations of males on either side of a territory border spending a lot of time just calling to each other and defending their territory. So bristlebird distribution in the past was a lot more extensive than it is today. Since European arrival, their range does appear to have contracted. So they previously extended, we had populations up in the Conondales, which is probably the most northern part of their distribution in Australia, all the way down through to Victoria. Now that range has contracted to a series of quite distinct populations, being the northern population here on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. We've got the central population in New South Wales, which is in the Jervis Bay area, and then when we go down to the southern population, we're talking about Malakuta, which people might remember of being hit really hard with the fires back in 2019, 2020. So bristlebird are really difficult to find. We've used a variety of techniques. So traditionally, finding bristlebirds is getting people out in the field, this really difficult country behind us, and trying to listen for birds and trying to see them. But more recently, we've used sound recordings. The call of bristlebird is really diverse though. It's a Gondwanan species, so it's been around for thousands of years. It's got a really complicated song, so it's been challenging finding an automated way of detecting that song amongst the myriad of other bird calls that are out in these areas. Where we're looking here, we're talking about more grassy open forest, where it's the clumping grass structure underneath that's critically important to Eastern Bristlebird, with gullies of rainforest providing that refugia from fire and from dry conditions. So the grasses in the habitats that bristlebird occupy are really important. We're talking about a diversity of native grasses that provide the essential food resources that they live on. Without the right grasses, you don't have the right insects, so therefore you don't support the bristlebird population. Particularly species like poas and sorghums and foxtail, they're the clumping grasses that provide the structure for bristlebird to build their nest in. But other native grasses like blady grass and kangaroo grass also are essential in the landscape to provide those food resources. So Eastern bristlebirds are considered endangered in Queensland and in New South Wales and in Victoria, and they're considered endangered nationally under the federal government's Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. The reasons why are numerous. One of the primary ones is fire management.
My name's Will Book. I work for the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service, and me and my team look after Lamington National Park, which is part of the Gondwana World Heritage Area. Fire management's been an important part of this landscape for millennia. Our challenges in a contemporary context is to try and maintain that and deliver it in the best way we can. We've been doing that by working with our neighbours to implement fire management on a 200 hectare block adjoining the National Park estate. So these burns occurred off park with a bit of a nil tenure or tenure blind perspective. This is really important for private landowners. It gives them an ability to manage country, support them financially, and follow that with some weeding and control of particular weeds such as lantana and crofton weed, which tend to invade the understory and modify the habitat, which then makes it unsuitable for the birds.
My name's Alan Goodwin. I'm a ranger with New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, and I'm up here in the Border Ranges National Park in one of our open grassy forests. We're managing these open grassy forests for a range of threatened species, including Eastern Bristlebird. These sort of habitats we're aiming to burn at about 3 to 6 years. After about 6 years, the tusks become quite floppy and they lose their structure. The birds don't use them as nesting material as easily. Within these habitats too, we're aiming for a mosaic of age classes, so we've got different structures, middle-aged grasses and older ones and younger ones, so the birds have a bit more choice. The Bristlebird project in particular has been a great, very rewarding project. We're burning on park, which we normally do, but we're also partnering with a lot of neighbours who've got similar habitat on their lands. They haven't got the skills to do prescribed burning, so we assist with burn planning and also resourcing on the day to help them implement the burns, and it's been a real success.
My name's Kelly Roche. I'm a Senior Threatened Species Officer with the Department of Planning and Environment in New South Wales. I work with the Saving Our Species program and I'm the coordinator for the Eastern Bristlebird project for New South Wales. Part of my role working with Eastern Bristlebird is to chair the Northern Working Group of the National Recovery Team for Eastern Bristlebird. This group is a fantastic group that is charged with implementing recovery actions for the northern population of Eastern Bristlebird. Part of what we do is come together across borders and all manner of individuals and organisations, and we work out what are the priorities for improving the trajectory of this northern population. The Saving Our Species program is the New South Wales Government's framework for managing threatened species across the state. It's been funded with more than $100 million of investment over the past 6 years. Where we are at present is on one of these private properties where landholders have been committed to restoring areas for Eastern Bristlebird for well into 15 years. This site here has seen the return of Eastern Bristlebird to an area that had previously been abandoned due to weed pressures and the lack of prescribed fire. And in the last 2 years we've seen a pair return to this location through the commitment of this landholder. Since it was first identified that the northern population was in decline, a lot of work has been done to monitor the birds in the northern population. We've now worked out where the majority of the birds are living. We've got territories mapped out across private and public land, and that helps us guide where we prioritise our habitat restoration work. So the goal would be to try to link up small clusters of isolated pairs of birds with other clusters so that those can connect with one another and interbreed and help the population size recover. While we could just work with restoring habitat alone to help the bristlebird recover, what we've found is that it doesn't work nearly as fast as we need it to. Because the population is so tiny in the north, we need to do other strategies as well that will accelerate the benefits that we can achieve through management. So one of the strategies we're using is captive breeding, to breed individuals in captivity that we can later release back into the wild as we progressively restore habitats.
My name's Anthony Molyneux and I'm the Life Sciences Manager here at Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary on the beautiful Gold Coast in Queensland. we try to connect our community with our nature and our native animals. Part of our conservation plan, we have a captive breeding program for the Eastern Bristlebird. Due to the bushfires of 2019 and 2020, we were able to secure some funding from the New South Wales State Government and the Federal Government. And this has enabled us to build 5 new enclosures at a new property that Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary has. And that property is Gurrama Conservation Reserve. And we're using this property to expand our captive breeding program of the Eastern Bristlebird. And the reason for expanding the program is because we need to add genetic diversity to this. And what this means is that we can't have a small population continually breeding with each other. We need new blood coming in so we can have a broad genetic base and also a robust population. So we're having these bristlebirds breed. We're also having some birds from the central population come up and do what we call genetic rescue. And this brings new genetics into the population and gives a nice, robust, healthy population of bristlebirds to ultimately release back into the wild.
Hi, I'm Alison Butel and I'm from Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary. Today I'm here at the Gurrama Conservation Reserve in the beautiful Currumbin Valley. So my background, I've been a bird keeper or worked with birds in the zoo industry for over 30 years. In particular, the northern eastern bristlebird population. So Gurrama fills an important role for that population or that program because it provides a beautiful, pristine environment for our birds to breed comfortably and quietly without any external interference. Our keepers have spent many months setting up the aviaries, planting and landscaping them, just so that they're perfect for the birds. So we kind of like them to have a little introduction period where they get to be housed side by side to kind of get to know each other, because some of these birds are being set up from young birds for the very first time for our breeding program. So on a daily basis, the role of a keeper out here at Gurrama Conservation Reserve includes not only servicing and making sure that the birds are well equipped with all the food and water requirements that they need, but also taking really accurate observations. These birds are territorial. The males can be quite overwhelming for females. So it's really important to get an idea of how well and how compatible our birds are, just to ascertain that they've got a good pair bond, that they're compatible, that there's no aggression, and that they're likely to have success with breeding.
Hi, I'm Dion Maple.
I'm Shane Sturgeon.
And I'm Thomas Moore, and we are park rangers from Buddery National Park. We look after the flora and fauna of the park. We look at conserve some threatened species, and we also control introduced species. One of our main threatened species that we work on is the Eastern Bristlebird. What occurs is that the team of staff head out early in the morning to listen for bristlebirds along 10 different transects within the park, and they total up to about 35 kilometres. And we walk along and listen for birds, and whenever we hear or see a bird, we write down data of which call they're making and take a GPS mark of the site. The Bristlebird monitoring project's been running now for about 20 years, which is a really long time to have a dedicated monitoring program for a species, which means that we've got a lot of valuable long-term monitoring data. Buddery National Park and the Wreck Bay Aboriginal community, along with our neighbours in Jervis Bay National Park, are excited and proud to be providing Eastern Bristlebirds for a translocation project now happening between here in the strong, robust central population and the species' southern population down in Victoria.
Probably one of the other key programs for bristlebirds is fox baiting. And fox baiting, since I've been here over 20 years, has been an ongoing program, which is a high priority in the plan of management. And what we do with fox baiting is that we bait the whole park and split up in 2 sections. When we put the baits out, we will actually get a team that will go out every day in the morning and monitor the bait takes, if there's any. And we'll do that once a month, and then we'll give it a couple of weeks rest, and then we'll do that all through the year. Reducing fox numbers in the park is very important for the bristlebirds, because the bristlebirds are very vulnerable, and we all know that foxes are very aggressive to native fauna.
Well, my hopes for the future is that more of our
staff and our TOs will hop on board and help support the importance of this project. I'm Dr. David Bain. I'm a Senior Threatened Species Officer with the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment. We're here in the beautiful Jervis Bay National Park looking at one of our amazing threatened birds, the Eastern Bristlebird. Jervis Bay National Park that we're here is one of the key populations of the Eastern Bristlebird. It's characterised by these heathland habitats, and the bristlebirds here are found fairly exclusively in this really thick heathland and swampy habitats, which is very different to where they occur up on the Queensland border. One of the main management focuses of these heathlands in Jervis Bay National Park has been for the conservation of the Eastern Bristlebird. And one of the conservation techniques that was tested out in the Jervis Bay area was translocation. That was actually part of my PhD research, where we collected birds from this side of Jervis Bay, in Jervis Bay National Park, and set up a new population over at Beecroft Peninsula. Now that was somewhere over 15 years ago, and it's been a huge success for the species. We've been able to set up a new population which provides us a bit of insurance for catastrophic events. Now that we have a better understanding that translocation is an appropriate conservation technique, the Victorian Government has approached New South Wales with an initiative to set up a new population of these species in Victoria. And because we have such a robust population here in New South Wales, it's a perfect place to source birds for that Victorian translocation. So this translocation it's bringing together people from across 3 different areas, from Victoria, New South Wales and experts from up in Queensland, and we're all pooling our resources. So along the tracks where we know there's good densities of Eastern Bristlebirds, we will erect some nets, some mist nets, and then we play their call on each side of the net. The birds are quite territorial, and so that should attract them to run across the track, and we'll get them caught up in the nets. If we have caught them in the nets, we'll put them into a small bag, and then we'll take them to a central processing place where we will give them a health check. The birds will be given a band on their leg, which will mean that we can identify them when they're down at the release site. And they'll also have a small radio tracking transmitter attached. And what that will do is allow us for the first sort of 2 to 3 weeks track their movements and their survival in the release area down at Wilson's Promontory.
Hi, I'm Beau Farnley from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Victoria. And I'm really excited to be standing here today in the beautiful Wilson's Promontory National Park, and we've just received 15 Eastern Bristlebirds from Jervis Bay, New South Wales, as part of our translocation project. Without intervention with translocations like this, they're a last resort, and they're expensive and they're a lot of work, but without that, the future of the species is not looking great. We weren't quite sure where they were going to go, but we knew the birds would tell us, and they're certainly doing that. So we've learned a few things. One is that they're crossing the fire break, where we weren't sure if they're going to do that, and they're freely moving back and forth. They're also foraging out into some of the burnt areas where we had a planned ecological burn, and they're utilising those areas to feed. What success looks like to me is my grandkids coming out here and seeing bristlebirds, you know, at the prom. I mean, that would be fantastic.
So what do we need to do for bristlebird? What do we do for nature conservation? Here on the east coast of Australia, where bristlebirds occur, we've got a rapidly growing human population. We've got pressures such as climate change. We've got the needs of people and community and economy, but we need to balance that in harmony with nature. Bristlebird occurs in such wild places, it's really hard to get hands-on, but there are things that you can do in your own local space, whether that's learning more about bristlebird, learning about fire management and weeds, joining your local land care or catchment group, or becoming a citizen scientist with organisations such as BirdLife and going out there and actually recording native species. Lots of people doing lots of little things adds up to a big deal, and that could actually really help save species like Eastern Bristlebird. So let's work together to make sure that the song of the Eastern Bristlebird is heard for many, many years to come.